When it comes to Trump's sycophants, the far right has a tight grip on too many people in uniform. And what if Trump leads another insurrection? How many military and law enforcement members will stand firm? Everyone surely remembers Donald Trump's appeals to law and order going all the way back to his infamous full page ad condemning the innocent Central Park Five title "Bring Back the Death Penalty" and "Bring Back the Police." When he ran for squatter, he sought out law enforcement at all levels as a discreet constituency, promising to let them take the gloves off and encouraging them to not be so nice to suspects. During the George Floyd protest during the summer of 2020, he told federal law enforcement and military leaders he wanted them to crack skulls and beat the shit out of any protester. At one point, he said, "Just shoot them." Luckily, they didn't do that. It took a devoted, Trump-loving sycophant named Kyle Rittenhouse to execute that order, and we know Kyle Rittenhouse is fucking guilty. Until the January 6th insurrection, Trump was the nation's most boisterous defender of police. Not really. But on that day, he was strangely reserved, tepidly tweeting that the rioters should be respectful, but pretty much remaining hands off for hours as his rabid sycophants had stormed the U.S. Capitol and assaulted hundreds of police officers who were trying to keep the mob from attacking members of Congress. And that night, he said the violent horde that did the felon was very special, and that he basically lied about loving them because he didn't really love them. You would have thought that this abject betrayal of Trump's supposed fealty to the men in uniform would have shaken their faith in him, but according to this new profile of former D.C. Metropolitan Police Officer and Trump sycophant Michael Fanone, by the Molly Ball of time, most of his former colleagues on the force remain devoted they're basically they're devoted to being sycophantic for Trump, and Panone came forward to publicly speak out about what happened in order to stand up for the police who were attacked that day. It didn't occur to him that the police themselves wouldn't back him or back down. Basically, this is what he had said. Maybe officers like him and Dunn, who wanted Trump held accountable, were the exception. And watching the body cam footage again, he noticed how many cops were standing around kibitzing with the rioters. He thought of his metropolitan police department colleagues. Out of more than the 3,000 that were on duty, about 850 have responded to the Capitol. But what about all the others? Ball continues. Where was the backup? Where was the police union, which rushed to the defense of any officer criticized by left-wing politicians? The Fraternal Order of Police, also known as FOP, which 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 were sycophantic for Trump in 2016 and 2020, had issued a lukewarm statement on January 6, urging everyone involved to reject the use of violence and to obey the orders of law enforcement officers to ensure that these events are brought to a swift and peaceable end. Numerous active duty FOP members have since been charged in connection with the riot. In at least one case, the union is trying to keep an accused rioter from being fired by his department, and colleagues he's known for decades don't talk to him anymore, and guys who have never called to check in when he was in the hospital sent him any taunting memes about his Democratic darling status. Panone thought that he was speaking for his fellow officers, but he was not. And he asks himself today, the vast majority of police officers would they have been on the other side of those battle lines? That is the question that everybody asks themselves, isn't it? The police on duty that day were protecting members of Congress from a violent mob that was trying to stop the peaceful transfer of power. And there is ambivalence among cops about whether that was the right thing to do, and that's also a chilling thing to think about. And it isn't just the police. Um, Trump's fake love for men in uniform wasn't confined to law enforcement. He saw the military as a constituency too, and was very popular among the troops, which I don't see how. In fact, he was so popular that in fact he really was. He's not really popular at all. But that a number of active duty military were among the riders on January 6th, and many are also members of the Oath Keepers, a far right group of former and current military and law enforcement. Last month, the Pentagon released new guidelines on how to deal with extremism in the ranks, which they now realize is a growing problem. The Washington Post reported that the University of Maryland Consortium released a report last month showing that since 1990, 458 crimes that were tied to extremism involved veterans or active duty U.S. troops. In fact, the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil before 9/11 was the Oklahoma City bombing, and it was carried out by a military veteran who had been radicalized while on duty and later joined a far right militia group. The military really doesn't have any idea how widespread this problem is getting. When you consider that someone like former General Michael Flynn, a far right conspiracy theorist and Trump's first national security advisor was in charge of military intelligence just a few years back, it's clear that this problem is not confined to the rank and file, and there are probably quite a few extremists among the active duty brass as well. So once again, this raises the question: what if this happens again? The retired generals wrote an op-ed recently asking that very question, and they note the participation of active duty and retired personnel in the January 6th Klan insurrection, as well as a number of retired flag officers who have signed on in support of being sycophantic for Trump, and they offered this hair-raising scenario as a possibility. The potential for a total breakdown of the chain of command among partisan lines, from the top of the chain to squad level, is significant. Is significant, and should an insurrection occur. The idea of rogue units organizing among themselves to support the rifle commander-in-chief cannot be dismissed. All service members take an oath to protect the U.S. Constitution, but in a contested election with loyalties split, some might follow orders from the rightful commander-in-chief, while others might follow the Trumpian loser. Arms might not be secured depending on who was overseeing them, but under such a scenario, it is not outlandish to say a military breakdown could lead to another civil war. The prospect of members of law enforcement agencies and the military breaking off into rogue commands seems like something out of a political thriller. And it's probably not very likely, but then the election of Donald Trump was unlikely, as was the insurrection of January 6th. And I would have thought it unlikely that police officers would defend a vicious mob beating other cops with flagpoles on the active duty military would bully participate in it, and we should all recognize by now that anything can fucking happen. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening.